Hey there, this is Alex Kluge, and I'm here from Toronto Home Experts. And I'm here to dive into the October 2023 Toronto real estate market update. Okay, before I dive into the numbers, just want to share a few things. Now, the numbers at a cursory level for the month of October don't really share the accurate picture of what's happening out there in the marketplace. So we're going to have to dive into a few other metrics just to really get an understanding of what's happening. And also, too, there's the eye test, like what's happening, as an active agent in this marketplace, like what am I seeing? So I'm going to share a few anecdotes. I'm also going to share some important stats, and I'm also going to share some interesting trends that we're noticing in the market right now. Okay, before I delay any further, let's dive right in. So October 2022, if you remember what I said last year, if you don't, that's okay. I will share what I said. I said it was the second worst October on record. So last year we had 4,930 sales during the month of October 22. And I said, what was the worst? It was the October 2002. And that was the financial crisis, if you remember, in the States. And that led to a lot of uncertainty, not only in the United States, but also here in Canada. And real estate was definitely affected. Now, this October 2023 is lower than the previous low of October 2008. So I'm not surprised in one sense, but that kind of goes to show in terms of what's happening in terms of market activity. There's, basically hesitation from buyers to buy in, which is fair enough because mortgage rates are essentially fixed rates are at a 20 plus year high. And that's affecting qualification. Like, you've got the stress test, which, adds, essentially 2% onto the mortgage qualification. So if you're having to qualify like 8.5%, it is not easy to qualify in this market. So we're seeing volume down accordingly, which is not surprising, right? So the other thing too is we're noticing is like new listings are rising. So here, actually, great segue into the next slide is we're seeing new listings up 38% from where they were last October. Now, again, take this with a little bit of a grain of salt. Yes, we're seeing inventories rise. Yes, we're seeing sales slow down. And that's, I don't want to say normal for, October. Yes, that's really, the start of the, slowdown in terms of the seasonality when it comes to real estate. So there's some of that in play a little bit. Now, the other thing to think about too is when we're looking at new listings, like what's the absorption rate? So like how quickly are those listings being absorbed? And the fact of the matter is, like, we're now seeing sales to new listings ratio at for the month of October, anyways, at close to all-time lows. Like we're at 32 point. I don't want to misquote it. Yeah, 32% for sales to new listings ratio for October 2023. Now, what was the second lowest was October, as you can probably imagine, the financial crisis, October 2008, and that number is 35%. So, it kind of goes to show that we're seeing inventories rise, we're seeing sales decline slightly, and that typically would result in a price adjustment, usually, right? Like, makes sense. Volumes go down, listings increasing, more choice for buyers. Typically, start seeing prices come down. But we're going to touch into prices in just a moment. But what I find fascinating is actually if we compare what the sales volume was for last month in September 2023, this month October was actually flat, which I found a little bit surprising, right? Because I thought, we actually probably would see a little bit of a bigger decline, but we didn't see that. And like September was a slow month, right? Because, and actually too, if you look at the calendar, and real estate doesn't actually start until after Labor Day, right? I'm exaggerating slightly, but we've got summer holidays and like Labor Day, so really like you're not taking a full 30 days. In October is really a full 31 days, and you don't have that little break, although you do have Thanksgiving, but that's really much more minor when it comes to active and new listings. But anyways, as I'm saying, we're talking about, new listings, which is actually now transitioning to active listings. Unsurprising to where we were last year, up 50%. Okay, so you're probably saying prices must be in a free fall right now if, listings are going up by 50%, and active listings are basically staying on the market. And that's not actually what's happening, which is interesting because if you remember my video from last month, I said, we're going to see an average price decline month over month. I was so sure of it. But guess what? I was actually wrong. The average price from September 2023 to October 2023 actually went up ever so slightly at 0.6%. And I know what you're thinking. You're like, Alex, like, that's a rounding error. Like, who cares about 0.6%? And then while I would agree with that statement, it's really not all that relevant. The fact of the matter is, like, average price can be a very misleading stat. And I know I've talked about this like repeatedly on this YouTube channel. And really, why is that? Well, it's basically taking, however many we had, like at 4,900 sales or 4,600 sales, it's taking the average price of those 4,600 sales. So, like, you're getting at a different mix each month. And so, average price is a little bit misleading. So, while we had a slight uptick from average price for September, October, prices actually come down. Like, prices are down. And my guess would be, somewhere around 2.5%, maybe 3%, which is not insignificant, right? I mean, it's a pretty big, and I'm talking about like for like if I'm looking at a condo, from, that's sold maybe early September to where it is in mid-October, I'm like, yeah, 2.5%, 3% is probably about right. And same goes for freeholds, although freeholds are behaving slightly differently. Like if you're looking at Toronto 416 only, one of the stats that I like to look at is months of inventory. And I know we don't have a slide on this, so just, don't worry about that. But months of inventory is like how quickly is the absorption of, the listings taking place. And for freeholds in the city of Toronto, it's like 3.5 months, 3.7 months actually to be exact. So 3.7, like, it's not terrible, like it's not. But condos is a different story. Condos, we've got over 6 months of inventory right now in Toronto. And we're seeing some of the areas that are, densely populated with condos, like downtown, North York, even Etobicoke by Kipling Station. Like, we're seeing inventories rise and, prices are coming down there. So that's not surprising. So again, when you're looking at average price, you got to take it with a little bit of a grain of salt. It doesn't tell the whole picture, but it does say that certainly with new and active listings rising, it is not surprising to see that we're at a point where prices are going to come down a little bit. Now, where we were from last year, we're up 3.5%. I think that's a little bit misleading, in my opinion. Like, do I think prices are up 3.5% from last year this time? Like, I don't think so. I think they're closer to being flat, in my opinion. And that's again looking at like a like house for like house, same street, similar square footage, similar finishes. Like, I don't think the prices are up from where they were last year. So, what can we expect for this winter? Well, I think we're going to see more of this, right? We're going to see, probably inventories rise. Probably we're going to see, listings come off the market and call it mid to end of December. And then, we're going to see January, see what happens. But until we get further guidance on what's happening with interest rates, certainly inflation looks like it's, trending in the right direction. I don't think we're quite where the Bank of Canada wants us to be. And, until we get some direction in terms of where variable rates are going, and certainly fixed rates are going to probably start coming down before then. But, we don't know. Is it going to be, sometime in mid 2024 when we see, interest rates starting to decline? Maybe. Could it be, September, Q3? Possibly. Like, I mean, it's way too early to call, but where I see kind of things going is that we're going to see a little bit of a lull this winter. And stuff's still going to sell if you're priced right. But if you're banking on like early 2022 price or early 2023 prices, like that's not the reality right now. Like we're seeing certainly a leg down, especially in condos when there was so much inventory out there right now. Okay, so breaking down what's happening in the GTA, we're seeing, and this is kind of a pretty good kind of trend when we see what happened in February, March 2022. So a pretty steep decline happened thereafter. So we saw a little bit of an uptick, this spring, which was kind of what we talked about, and we've seen a little bit of leveling off, and I could see probably more of the same what happened last year, like basically just going flat, maybe a slow grind down. But do I predict that we're going to see a real estate crash? I don't see that right now. I mean, certainly, that could change. We see some new economic data to support that. But anyways, we're going to have a very interesting fall and winter, real estate wise. And, my honest take is if you're in a position that you want to possibly get into the real estate market, like if you're buying your first home, over the next 6 months could be an interesting time. So anyways, obviously depends on your financial circumstances and whether or not, you can qualify for mortgage. So please ask us for direct questions with respect to what your goals are. We can try to help match those to what's happening in the market. But, I can see a softening, and we are seeing a softening. And so, is it going to be like this forever? I'm not convinced that, we're going to have the same, sort of market sentiment like a year and a half from now. Certainly a year from now, I can see us being in a much different place. But, the fact of the matter is, interest rates is a major impact on real estate affordability, obviously. But, we've got strong immigration that's still continuing to happen in the GTA. And I think that's going to be the story for real estate in 2025. I think when we're looking back at what happened this year and even parts into next year, we're going to see that demand come back, is my speculation. But short term, I think it's going to be more of what we're seeing right now. Anyways, I know we're talking about future, but I really want to talk about what's happening now and what to expect over the kind of the immediate term. So, we're looking at stats from where we were last year. I've noticed Durham region is actually pretty strong right now, especially the freehold market. We've seen more weakness in Halton region, Peel, and York region. Toronto is really being held up by freeholds, but condos is quite slower. So anyways, these are average stats. So don't, put too much into these, but really what we're here to just share is what's happening in overall market sentiment. How does that impact you as a seller or a buyer? Certainly, if you have questions, you can certainly reach out to us, and we're happy to have a one-on-one consultation with you to give you that feedback in terms of what's happening in your neighborhood, because certain neighborhoods are actually doing really, really well right now, which is a little bit counterintuitive to some of the stats. And conversely, there's some neighbors that are really doing poorly. So be sure to ask us questions, because really it is very neighborhood specific right now. Okay, thank you so much for tuning in to this month. We love the questions that we're getting, and I think November is going to be also a very interesting month. Probably my prediction, if I've been making predictions this whole video, so what the heck, I'm going to make some more predictions. I'm going to say I'm going to predict that average prices are going to go down next month. I mean, that's not a bold statement by any stretch, but I did get it wrong this month. I was, with average prices being up ever so slightly, I wasn't correct. But I think we're going to start to see, average prices grind down, for the next couple of months. And then let's see what happens in the new year. But anyway, stay tuned for next month's video. I think it's going to be a great one. Again, thanks for the feedback, and we will see you next month. Bye for now.